Nearly 100 years ago, on a late spring afternoon in England, two young scholars met for the first time at an English faculty meeting at Oxford University. Little did they know that this meeting would mark the beginning of a friendship that would help transform them into two of the greatest storytellers the world has ever known. And as a result, these stories have changed the world as we know it today. In celebration of Tolkien Reading Day and the great and famous friendship of J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, we're going to spend some time today talking about the crucial role that each man played in the creation of each other's worlds, and why, without one another's friendship, there would be no true Narnia or Middle-earth. So let's get started. It's time to leave our world behind and step into a world that's more real than our own. It's time to follow me into the wardrobe. For Clive Staples Lewis and John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, the first meeting in Oxford was actually a bit unremarkable. Lewis, a large and body man, must have found Tolkien amicable enough, although perhaps a bit small and bookish. They spent a brief time arguing about whether or not linguistics or literature was more interesting. Tolkien joked that literature was written for the amusement of middle-aged men. Later that night, Lewis would write in his diary that Tolkien was a smooth, pale, fluent little chap, but there was no harm in him. He only needs a smack or two. The two soon became fast friends. Their friendship had strong intellectual branches, but it was deeply rooted in their common histories. They both lost their mothers at a young age. They were both shaken to the core by their terrible experiences in the trenches of World War I. And this sorrow over the past led them both to retreat from the trappings of modern life and get lost in the escapism of storytelling. Against this background, the men bonded over a common love for, of all things, mythology. While Tolkien was a tried and true fan of ancient Norse tales, Lewis himself seemed to be less discriminate, enjoying myths from all over the world. Regardless, it was their love of myths and stories that would not only guide the words they wrote, but the men they would become. Their friendship grew quickly, and the men would often find themselves in deep conversation about philosophy, theology, poetry, and of course, writing. They would often share their own writings with one another. Tolkien even allowed Lewis the privilege of reading one of the first manuscripts of The Hobbit. Within 4 years' time, the men had founded an informal literary society known as the Inklings. Each week, they'd gather, most famously at a local pub called the Eagle and Child, which was also known to regulars as the Bird and the Babe. Over a pipe and a pint, the group would pass the time discussing literature, reciting poetry, and most notably, reading aloud their personal writings. It was here that Tolkien began to sow the seeds of what would eventually become the vast and intricate world of Middle-earth. As he worked meticulously over 17 years, he would read aloud the newest passages to the group. Lewis was particularly enthralled with these readings, at times gasping in delight, and at other times weeping over the poignancy of a passage. Lewis knew that Tolkien was on the verge of greatness, and he enthusiastically encouraged Tolkien to press on. Lewis's encouragement would serve to be invaluable to Tolkien, as he would later write, "The unpayable debt that I owe to him was not influence, but sheer encouragement. He was for long my only audience." While Lewis served as a crucial companion for Tolkien in his literary journey, Tolkien was helping guide Lewis in a more personal, spiritual journey. In the early years of their friendship, Lewis was a staunch atheist while Tolkien was a devout Catholic. Throughout countless conversations, Lewis moved from an atheist to a theist, a believer in the general existence of a god, though he couldn't come to accept any single religion as true. They were, in his opinion, all myths, and myths were really just lies. However, on an early morning stroll in September of 1931 with Tolkien and another friend named Hugo Dyson, Lewis began to see things differently. Tolkien explained that myths were not lies at all. They were stories which conveyed deep truths of the universe, truths that couldn't be grasped otherwise. According to Tolkien, all the myths that they loved so dearly revealed characteristics of the nature of the universe and its creator. The story of Christ was different, only in that it was not just a myth, but it was also true. The difference was, it really happened. This conversation profoundly changed Lewis, and soon thereafter he would convert to Christianity. And so you can see the profound impact that each man had made on the other. For Tolkien, Lewis served as a constant source of encouragement as he labored to bring to fruition his great and profound work. To be certain, if not for Lewis spurring him on, the Lord of the Rings saga may have never seen the light of day. Even Tolkien himself said of Lewis's contribution, "But for his interest and unceasing eagerness for more, I should never have brought The Lord of the Rings to a conclusion." The literary praise, however, was not a two-way street. Tolkien actually openly and famously despised Lewis's Narnian stories. For Tolkien, the meticulous linguist and scholar who spent more than a decade developing his world, the Chronicles of Narnia were rushed, underdeveloped, and clunky. He despised the mixing of mythical creatures from many different cultures and thought that the spiritual allusions were far too on the nose. However, Lewis always valued image over depth and story over detail, and Tolkien's criticisms certainly didn't slow him down, as Lewis released all 7 Narnia books in just as many years, a lightning pace compared to Tolkien. However critical Tolkien was of Lewis's stories, it's essential to realize that Tolkien actually made a far greater contribution to the creation of Narnia stories than unfettered praise and encouragement. Because Narnia was written on the foundation of Christian truths. Every journey, every battle, every character development, and the very world itself was built around Lewis's faith in Christ and the noble and beautiful truths he found therein. If Tolkien hadn't shared his own faith with Lewis so many years before, if he hadn't nourished that faith through friendship, trust, and honesty, Lewis wouldn't have become the man he was. The man who could draw upon great truths found in myths around the world, and through the power of story, would point to the ultimate and only true myth of Christ. So, on this Tolkien Reading Day, we say thank you, J.R.R. Tolkien, not only for giving the world the gift of Middle-earth, but more importantly for giving your friend the gift of truth, and in turn, making it possible for us all to discover and enjoy the wonderful world of Narnia. Thanks for taking this different kind of journey with me today. I hope you've enjoyed it. We'll be back next week with more Narnian lore, so be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out. I look forward to meeting you back here soon as we take another journey into the wardrobe.